Yes, 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 and welcome to C3Arts Radio. This is your loyal host, Phillip Harvey, coming live and direct to you from City College, New York. Of course, the college on the hill. And we are the broadcast arm of the City College Center for the Arts. And it is a cold, blustery Tuesday, but it's warm here in the studios of WHCR 90.3 FM that we come to you every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. And please know that you can also check us out online. That's at WHCR.org. That's where you can live stream us. Also, tunein.com and several other of these kind of online radio stations. You can find us, WHCR-FM. And always, the party always continues online. That's C3ArtsRadio.com, the most beautiful website in the world. And C3 Radio on Twitter and Instagram, and C3 Arts Radio on Facebook. And we are here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with my right-hand man, Mr. Winston Brewington.
Hello, world. What's going on?
Yeah. And we're also here with the wonderful, lovely Miss Melody Vaughn.
Oh, Phillip, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And we have another great show lined up for you today.
Oh, my God, I'm so excited.
Now, the reason Melody is saying she's so excited is because our guest today, one of several guests today, but our spotlight today is a woman that I have been trying and wanting to get on our show for a long time, and I was trying to figure out when we would actually be ready, when we would actually be prepared to be able to host the great singer, songwriter, producer, and many, many other things. We're going to find out right away. Miss Cy Smith is going to be joining us today. Fantastic.
Oh, you have no idea. She is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to jump right into it. I want to thank her and welcome her to the show right now. Miss Cy, are you here with us? How you doing today?
I'm good. Am I on? Am I live?
You are live.
Awesome. What's up, everybody?
Well, you know you're always live.
And officially, I am officially your biggest fan.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. For real?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that so much. And I'm really honored to be on your show today, you guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming.
Of course. Now, Cy, I'm going to jump into it a little bit. Of course, we're here. You have a new album out. Sometimes a rose will grow in concrete, and it's a fantastic album. And we're going to really kind of try to dissect it here today on C3 Arts Radio. But first, we want to get into a little bit about you. You have such a fascinating story in and of itself, and doing a lot of research and background. Besides the fact that I've known you for a good long time now.
Right.
He slid that in. Well, just know I'm a bigger fan than he is, regardless of how long he's known you.
But still, there was so many fascinating details and such. Now, I want to take you back, Si. I want to take you back to when you started to establish that this was the love of your life. Now, there are a lot of conversations in terms of how you began, and one of the things you talk about quite a bit is for example, your relationship to singing in the church. How you didn't sing in the church a lot, but you picked up these kind of musical influences from these different ways, and it's really quite fascinating. If we can take you back to the beginning where you first kind of start to fall in love with music, and you start to make that decision, that determination that you know that this is what you're going to be doing.
Back to the beginning would have to be in my grandfather and grandmother's basement. They had this piano, this old out-of-tune piano, and they had a book. My aunt had this book. I think it was like Liberace or something.
Yeah, I remember Liberace every Sunday.
Yeah, and I would go down there. We're talking about like maybe when I was about 4 or 5. I would go down there and open that book, and I hadn't really learned how to read music yet. I could barely read probably when I was 4, but I would go down there and just play that piano, and my granddad taught me how to play what he called the boogie woogie, on the black keys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was your basic sort of walking bass line, boom, 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 boom,
Right.
And
right.
I was like fascinated with just the sounds I could make on the piano, and making my own little songs. And I was probably not singing quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I started really singing and probably until maybe I was about 7 or 8. And even then, I was a closet singer. I wasn't singing in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
I was just making my own little tapes and really just using my voice to entertain myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily just singing. I would take out the tape recorder and just make up my own newscasts. And I'd be like, "This is Cy Smith with the Sesame Street News," and I would make my own little news, like my own little theme songs to go with my little newscasts on these little Casio keyboards that I had,
Right.
probably starting around 8 or 9. So even up till about 9 or 10, the voice for me was an instrument of self-entertainment. You know what I mean?
And that's very interesting
Wow.
because you go on and you develop that. And we'll talk about that a little bit because the way of using your voice as an instrument as well. So that started very early.
Yeah, it started very early, and it was really a means of entertainment. I was an only child to my mother, and I was often by myself, when it came to being around relatives. I was usually the only kid around, so there was a lot of time for me to indulge myself.
Right.
Wow.
Now you're originally from New York, and then you grew up in the DMV, correct?
That's correct.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
I was born there, right there in the city, and my father's from Queens.
From
Shout out to
Queens.
Queens.
Yeah.
And he's from Jamaica, Queens, and then I grew up in D.C. and I spent a lot of time in Tennessee with my grandparents.
Right,
Oh,
right,
nice.
right. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, so tell us a little bit, Si, because you were at a very young age dealing with kind of very complicated music, like chamber music, for example. It seems
Yeah.
like it seems like that's very kind of a complicated music for a young person to come up in terms of starting to kind of mold their voice. It seems like it was a
Well,
great thing, but how did that transpire?
When I started showing serious interest in music, and I begged my mother for private instruction in piano, I didn't even know how to articulate it. I was just like, I need a teacher where it's just me and the teacher, Mom, like, because she had me in these sort of public classes and I couldn't take it. But when I started taking private piano lessons, I was introduced to all the stuff that you learn in private lessons. Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, somewhat, and that kind of stuff really started my ear for classical music.
Right.
Then when I started singing in public, this is when in elementary school I auditioned for choir. The concert repertoire for choir usually involved, especially Brahms, and I'm trying to think back on what we did. There was a lot of Brahms. I don't really remember much of other back then, but that really got my ear into singing that kind of stuff. I already played it,
Yeah.
but I was like, oh my God, you can sing this stuff too? That's amazing.
Right.
And I was in the Prince George's County Honors Course from 6th grade all the way through, high school. And that's what we did, was some of that really cool chamber music, and under the tutelage of Dr. Barbara Baker at Eleanor Roosevelt High School.
Yeah, quite famous, quite legendary.
Yes, she's legendary. We got to do things in the classical realm, but also just sort of chamber stuff that was not necessarily from those classical composers, but like stuff in Japanese and things that were in German and stuff based off of the poetry of E.E. Cummings. Like, it was really a diverse repertoire that I got from that kind of singing, that I can't imagine I would have gotten elsewhere. You know, I did go to church. Like, don't get it twisted. I went to First Baptist on Minnesota and C Street Southeast. That's my church family, and I played piano in church. But getting me to sing in church was like pulling teeth, and the reason was I was just so in love with the singers who were already there, and I studied those singers, you know, from my church. I just didn't want to sing in the church because I was like, I can't sing like them.
Little did they know they couldn't sing like you.
Nah.
Wow.
No, I just tried to. I think I just grabbed a lot from wherever I could get it. You know what I mean? As kids do. You know, we just grab information anywhere it comes, and that's why it's so important that we are careful about what and how we teach our kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So true.
Absolutely.
So true.
Yeah.
It's almost like kind of building this mosaic in a sense. You start to see kind of the pieces come together because if you think about your style and over the years how things have transgressed, you see all of these other influences. And one I'm about to talk about, which is of course special to people from the DMV, of course, which is go-go. And I know that was a huge shaper for you as well. So we're talking about classical chamber music, the exposure to gospel music, and then we also have go-go, and we'll get to the hip hop, but go-go music, which is such a cultural shaper for people who grow up in the DC area.
Absolutely.
And I know that you were singing and playing with the go-go bands, which I think is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. How cool is that? Wow.
How was that kind of a transition, or was it basically an add-on? How did you get involved in the go-go scene in DC?
You know, I was always a B girl. I was always into hip hop. I was that girl that came to the playground with her own boombox, you know, and fat laces on my Adidas and that kind of thing.
I love it.
So go-go was sort of a subgenre of funk for people who don't know. You already know this, but I'm talking to the audience who doesn't really know. We're talking post-disco. The scene in D.C. post-disco was a scene for cabaret bands to play basically be the DJs for parties. So these bands played songs back to back to back to back without stopping, just like a DJ would play tracks back to back to back. And they would keep these songs kind of flowing by keeping them in the same pocket, right? So go-go to me, if chamber music and my concert repertoire from choir sort of gave me a discipline in how to approach pitch and how to approach my breathing and stuff, go-go taught me how to swing. You know, there's no swing like a go-go swing. And,
you should see Winston here. You should see Winston here nodding his head. He's like, that's right.
Got a lot of connections. Got a lot of connections in the DMV, so I'm very familiar with the genre. It's crazy.
Yeah. So go-go definitely taught me how to swing and taught me how to ride a pocket. And I think that for that reason, you know, I've been able to work with so many, especially drummers. Like drummers seem to really appreciate my pocket. So you'll catch me on an album with, you know, Jeff Tain Watts or Chris Dave or, you know, just name a drummer, and I've probably worked with them. you know, and go-go also, through the godfather of go-go, Chuck Brown. Everybody knows that he's the godfather of go-go, but he also schooled a whole generation or two on standards, on jazz standards.
Wow.
Yeah,
you know,
this is very true.
So
very true.
So my earliest jazz sort of leanings were probably from Chuck Brown and probably from go-go. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't even think I knew Moody's Mood from James Moody. I knew it from Chuck Brown. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So definitely my earliest probably jazz leanings came from go-go first. And my go-go experience after I finished high school, Phillip was alluding to this. I played keyboards in an all-girl go-go band. And that sort of trained my ear in a whole other way, because I had to listen to these songs that we were learning not just, you know how you listen to the radio and you just learn your words and learn, whatever. But I had to listen and learn these horn parts,
Right.
or learn these string parts, because that's what I was going to be playing, And that was a whole other type of schooling. It was interesting because people go to school for years to learn how to do this, and I just, I got the training on deck with a go-go band, and then the next week we're playing at the Ibex or whatever.
The Ibex, legendary for you, DC. All you listeners in DC, you know what I'm talking about, the Ibex. Absolutely.
But that was some of the best schooling I probably could have ever had, and most musicians will probably say this about wherever they hone their craft. Learning on the spot is like that's the best way to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just somewhat of a short time after this, you find yourself at a very young age singing on stage with Whitney Houston.
Yeah, it wasn't too long after that at all. So,
Yeah.
So I went to Howard right after high school, and then right after I graduated from Howard, well, not right after, but not too long after I graduated from Howard, I moved to Los Angeles. And, after my first gig was with Kenny Lattimore. That was my first road tour,
Right.
Yeah. And shout out to Kenny and all his folks. And right after Kenny was when I got the Whitney Houston gig, and that changed everything.
Oh my God, I can imagine.
Yeah, I think I was like 22 or 23 at Constitution Hall live on HBO with Whitney Houston, and that was my first show with her.
Yeah, that's right, live on HBO.
When you do it big, girl.
Live on HBO, Constitution Hall. Wow, it doesn't get any bigger than that.
And that was amazing to be back in my hometown, for one, on stage with one of the most brilliant vocalists to ever do it, and have my mom and dad in the audience.
Shout out to mom and dad.
We're gonna circle back around to your father there. There's something we want to talk about with him. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so this seems like it's just really the beginning of as you might say, schooling, because there's so much more that comes. Now, one of the things I'm quite interested in is I know you were influenced by Ella Fitzgerald, and Ella Fitzgerald, of course, was often known as the human voice of instrumentation, a person who could really be a soundboard for instruments. And I know that you have a great interest in horns and how you listen to horns and how you think about them and some of your phrasing and through the horns. And I remember a conversation that we once had. I'm going to get a little personal here for a second.
Girl. Here we go.
And you were talking about how often now side, or at least this was a few years ago, how you would think of Bone Thugs and Harmony in terms of their kind of runs and things when you were kind of preparing, in a sense. I know there's a whole kind of process to your prepreration, which this doesn't necessarily fit in that easily, but you would think about the phrasings of Bone Thugs and Harmony and how they kind of played out. But then with the phrasing of Ella Fitzgerald also within the influence, and then your own instrumentation on top of that. And we're not even getting into the bringing in of cyber soul in a sense as its own kind of genre and brand. You really start to get the baseline for a person who can can do it all. Can really cover all the bases here. But was this something which was planned, strategic? It seems like a lot of it just kind of came together in a sense.
I don't know that I'm smart enough to plan that well. I think I do. I just have an appreciation for things like for authenticity and Ella Fitzgerald, the way her voice was, to me, it just felt so authentic. It was authentically playful, and it was authentically whimsical, and there was something about that easy whimsy that just that just really grew on me and felt like home to me. You know what I mean? And in the same way, there's something about Bone Thugs, about their bluesiness.
Right.
And because what they do for real, when they came out on the scene and everybody was like, oh my God, what is this? It was blues, you know? And rhythmically, it was so African, you know, like without even knowing it. That whole, you know what I mean? It was so African, and it just spoke to me in the way that it spoke to millions. You know, that's why they went platinum like they did. Those sort of tribal rhythms and that sort of ancestral homecoming felt good to me, and it felt like something that I should grab a hold on and implement in my own thoughts and my own approach, you know. When it fits, you know, and when it feels good, you know, put it in there, you know. And these things might not even be obvious in my music, you know, unless you know me, like Phil knows me, you know. But yeah, almost every night before my shows, I warm up to Bone Thugs.
Oh, wow.
I
cool.
do.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Because it feels good in my bones, and it feels good in my lips, you know, and it just feels good rhythmically to get pumped up to that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, all right. Well, let's get into some of the new music. We're going to get into some of the new music. From Sometimes the Rose Will Grow in Concrete. Now, this is the current single, Now and Later. And we're going to get into that. We'll be right back with Miss Cy Smith at C3Arts Radio.
Before you go thinking I'm soft, let's get one thing understood. You can't keep on brushing me off. You're gonna treat me like you should. You're cooler than a polar bear's toenails. Oh hell, the hawk's got nothing on you. But when it gets a little bit warm, I bet you warm up to me too. I can't wait for summertime when I make you mine and I never let you go. And once I got you, I'm never gonna drop down, put you in my pocket so I can save a little something for now. And save a little something for later. Hey, winter's got me covered up. I need the sun to come out soon. When you see me in this dress, I bet you change your attitude. You're cooler than the pillows at the side, no jive. I bet you bleed iced tea for true. I'll give it about 15 degrees, and then I'm putting all of this on you. I can't wait for summertime when I make you mine and I never let you go. And once I got you, I'm never gonna drop down, put you in my pocket so I can save a little something for now.
Yes, yes, yes. And we are back, C3Arts Radio, right here, WHCR 90.3 FM. And we have in the house the person who wrote and sang that song. Now and Later, Miss Cy Smith. Now, we probably need to give you a little more context on Cy Smith here.
Please do, because, you know, he's all cool and everything, and I'm over here like, radio.
So, you know, just very quickly, I'm going to run through some of the things that you probably are aware or should definitely be aware. Of course, we have Cy Smith, who sang lead for the band of American Idol for 6 seasons.
Yeah.
Also sang lead with the great Ricky Minor on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
Yeah.
Maybe you know her from this, Sometimes Rose Will Grow in Concrete, which is her latest album.
Yeah.
Yay.
Okay, I'm your little cheering section over here, because, you know.
I love it. I love it.
Or maybe
It's like my own little amen corner.
Exactly. Exactly.
or I'm still going here too. So because maybe
Oh.
you know her from her ongoing partnership and collaboration with Chris Botti, of course, the great jazz
Wow.
trumpeter, or her work with the Foreign Exchange.
Wow.
Hey,
Ain't that money, girl?
Of course, Nikolai Infante of Foreign Exchange.
Nice.
And we can just go on and on and on and
Yeah.
on. So it's very important for us to give you some context here as well. Oh yeah, and let me not forget this. Also, as really one of the architects of the soul music scene in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Absolutely one of the engineers
Very cool.
and thrusts for establishing a scene for soul singers, underground soul, or whatever you want to call it,
Thank
the
you.
music in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now, Sai, this
Yeah.
this new album, we've been talking about. You're a person who is always evolving. What was the impetus for this album? What were you working off of? What kind of space were you in?
Well, I was in a space of sort of soul searching. It had been probably, my last album was in 2012. And I had sort of kind of become disillusioned with things, personal things in my life. Nothing terrible. I wasn't going through anything life changing, but I just wanted to take a step back for myself before I stepped back into myself. Do you know what I mean?
I love it. Yeah.
And so I was doing some touring with the Foreign Exchange and Zoe and Sheila E. and I left the Tonight Show and American Idol, and I sort of left the gigs that really paid my bills to do gigs that I wasn't sure was going to pay anything.
Right. Yeah.
Stepping out on faith. I love
But
it.
sometimes you have to do that
Yes.
to remember why you make music in the first place,
Absolutely.
And I was really lucky to be able to tour with Sheila E. And
Yeah.
and
I mean, I caught your show in London at was it Ronnie Scott?
yes,
Yeah,
at Jazz Cafe.
Jazz Cafe. That's
All
right. That's
right.
right.
Yes.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, and so Sheila really inspired me to get back in the studio and produce myself, and I had sort of forgotten that, you know what, I had been so used to like working with other producers, which is great, but I had sort of forgotten that, you know what, I could probably produce it now myself. So originally I was just going to maybe produce one or two songs and then maybe work with a producer. But I, to be honest with you, like the guy that I was calling to work with me wouldn't call me back.
What?
So every time I was ready to go in the studio, I couldn't get in touch with him. So I would just, produce the song myself. And after about 3 songs of, sort of writing and fleshing them out by myself, I was like, maybe I should just do my whole album like this. Like,
Right.
what's stopping me?
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing stopping me is me.
Yeah.
So I just hunkered down with my engineer over the course of about 2 years. It took me about 2 years.
Okay.
But that was because I was, like you said, Phil, I was out on the road with Chris Botti, and Chris Botti likes to likes to tour.
Yeah,
So
he still doesn't have a house, right? He doesn't have a home.
he still doesn't have a home. He lives down there in the Mercer Hotel, I think.
Yeah.
But
Place to stay, but,
so between road stints with Chris, I would come back to LA and write a song and hash it out, and then that song itself might take 4 months to really hash out, after I demo it and all that kind of stuff. So so it took me about 2 years to really get this album done, but at the end of the day I was so happy with how each song came to be, and so proud of the because this is really the purest, I think, album from me,
Yeah, absolutely. So I wish we had a lot more time to talk about, because there's a lot more to get into. Maybe we can get
Well,
you
then we
back
have to
on
do
the
it
show.
again.
exactly. You have
Yeah.
to come here. We got to do it here.
Well,
I would
got
love
us a
to
long
come there.
play, but yeah, we could get it. But definitely. So the name of the album, Sometimes a Rose Will Grow in Concrete. It's like, if you could just quickly tell us, where should people go to get their own copy? Because we've got our copy and we're not sharing.
He is holding on tight. Love is holding on tight.
That is hilarious. I would love it if people go to iTunes or Google Play or Amazon and buy the record there. Just search Cy Smith, Sometimes a Rose Will Grow in Concrete. Or if you are a collector of physical products, you can go right to my website at cyberspace.bigcartel.com or cysmith.com, and you can get the CD directly from me.
All right.
Cool.
All right.
If you're a streamer, it's streaming on all the platforms. But an indie artist, and it doesn't pay for itself.
That's right.
Purchases make a difference.
And that's something we have to talk a lot
Yes.
about next time, Cy, about all the success you've had as an instrument.
I hope
as
so.
an
Yeah,
indie
we got to
artist.
talk about it. And you know what? I'm
Yeah.
going to be in New York performing on April 7th at the Django at the
Okay.
Roxy
Oh, cool.
Hotel.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
So-
fantastic.
Yeah,
right.
so people can go to opentable.com and make reservations for April 7th at the Django.
Done. I'm getting the front seat.
Yes,
Done,
do
done.
it.
There we go. Thank you so much,
I
Miss
love you.
Cy
Thank you very
Smith,
much, Cy.
ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be right back. C3 Arts Radio.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you,
guys.
Cy.
Okay.
Ríe, con reír no haces mal, todo amor al final, deja el pecho sangrando, el corazón llorando, por siempre lamentando. Ríe, como aquel infeliz que queriendo reír soltó un grito de llanto y terminó llorando como si fuera un niño y solo sabe Dios qué fue lo que sintió. La vida es así, fingimos reír y en la mueca se ve un llanto.
Yes, and we are back, ladies and gentlemen, C3 Arts Radio. And that was fantastic.
Oh
Cy
my
Smith.
gosh,
Yes.
that was so fabulous.
And
She's phenomenal. Girl power.
definitely, please go pick up a copy of Sometimes a Rose Will Grow in Concrete. It's the latest offering from Cy Smith, one of
What
our
a-
real treasures. And we keep going here at C3 Arts Radio, because the only way to back up Cy Smith is to have another fantastic artist, and we do. Last week, we were having some trouble. We couldn't really get into our conversation with the great Mark Carey, so we asked Mark to come back on the show this week.
I'm right here.
Yeah, there he is. And we're so happy to have him back. How you doing today, Mark?
Oh, I'm great, man. I feel good, Phillip. How you doing?
Oh, doing good, Mark. Yeah, we're here. We have Melody Vaughn, one of our great co-hosts, of course.
Mark.
Hi, Melody. How you doing?
I'm so glad you made it back. You were back. I missed you last week. Well,
Right, that was a brief one. We got almost got a few minutes in there, though. I felt like I did something.
everything happens in divine order. You know, we had to meet. So.
And Mr. Winston
Indeed.
Brewington, of course, my right-hand man, is joining us here on the line here. Mark.
What's up, Mark? How are you?
Hey, everything's good. I'm enjoying the, time here on this planet as much as I can.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Mark, now, for just to give you some context, Mark Carey really is one of the kind of transcendental musicians that we have for a generation. And his career spans really since the 90s. And he is not only kind of fortified nationally, but also here in New York, we know that he really is an indispensable member of the music community here as well. And Mark's history touches on a lot of points, but one of the many great relationships that he had was with the great Abby Lincoln. And this is part of the focus of a new program. It's called Mother of the Movements, and it's being put on by Harlem Stage, and it's a little more complicated than that. It's Harlem Stage in partnership with the National Black Theater, and it's also part of a larger program that Carnegie Hall is doing as well, which is called the 60s, the Years That Changed America. It's happening all around the city. But Mark Carey, of course, is doing a very, very special program that we were able to get into just a little bit last week, and we really wanted to pick it back up. He is, first of all, leading an all-star band, an absolute all-star band. I want to get into that a little bit today, Mark.
Yeah.
And they're doing a reinterpretation of We Insist, Max Roach's Freedom Now suite, of course, one of the most important albums, and we could talk a lot about why I would say that and why many other people would echo my statement at that as well. Really one of the most important albums of the late 20th century, or the second half of the 20th century up until now, as we might say. And Mark Carey is just the person to lead this kind of reinterpretation, this re-grasping, re-look at this important album. And I want to know, Mark, what does it mean to you, an album of such social importance? What does it mean to you? I know that you infuse a lot of these themes and a lot of ideas, and just the way that you move in general, that it means something to you. But what makes you kind of lock in on this particular project?
Well, the project itself is just sonically, for one, it's an experience to listen to and continue to imagine even further than the stories that I've learned about it and everything. But it's a journey, for one. It's a time period that I was born out of. So I was born in ’67.
Right. Yeah.
So that's these 7-year cycles for me. But I really am into the fact that I got to know Max a bit, and people that looked up to him as much as I got to know Abby a lot more. But I got to know a lot about Max through Abby, and his genius. And I think this album was significant. It became a lot more significant to me once I learned their stories, behind, like, for us now, it's like this incredible point to look at, and when things are in transition, they're not popular most of the time. People don't like change. And this album was all about change and identifying things that needed change and identifying some of the things that, you know,
Yeah.
have always stayed the same.
Right. It's so interesting, Mark, because you have this period, and we talked a little bit about this last week, but there was this period where you think jazz music has a kind of a social consciousness kind of embedded in it, but here you have this period where it kind of explodes. You have Coltrane doing album. You have you have Max Roach and Abby Lincoln really starting to collaborate and do their work together. So it's no longer a tie that's that you just assume is there. You kind of know is there. It's very implicit in this in this subject.
Yeah, there's a whole culture around it, and I think it's incredible that time period they were also trying to unify a lot of the black musicians who were recording for these different labels at the time, and not getting their fair cut due to the lack of knowledge of publishing. The business that was put together by Bertelsmann's music group, BMG, and
Hello, Mark. Are you still with us?
I think we lost Mark by accident.
Okay, well, we're going to have to get Mark back on here. We'll keep having this bad luck with Mark Carey. Ladies and gentlemen, so we'll be right back. C3 Arts Radio.
I think we just need to go to the show.
Yes, and we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We got Mark back on the air. We've just been having terrible luck here with my favorite guest, and we keep cutting down our conversation. How you doing, Mark? Are you still with us?
Does this only happen on Black History Month?
Well, I think everyone just needs to come to this show.
Well, yeah,
everybody just needs to go to the show.
Absolutely. we're getting to that at the moment. But we were trying to get Mark Carey on the show for months and months and months, and then we get him on the show, and we keep losing the connection here. But just to kind of move us back a little bit, we were going into the kind of the culture necessarily that this album was kind of made out of. We've talked a number of times here on C3 Arts Radio about the relationship between Max Roach and Clifford Brown, and
Yeah.
the kind of devastation that not only that it wreaked upon Max Roach, but also the whole jazz community. Clifford Brown was a very high person held in high esteem in the community, and then he kind of reforms, and with his wife Abby Lincoln, and they kind of reform, and they come up with this kind of treasure. And I know, Mark, that you played for years with Abby Lincoln. What was Abby like as a kind of mentor figure, a person that you could kind of learn from? That seems very simple, but that there were so many things to learn from her in a sense. And how would you say, just in a very kind of clear way, that impacted you? And I know that she would be very, very happy right now to see what you've done from her tutelage. But in what way would you say, Abby, that she directly impacted you?
Well, she taught me to claim what's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point I was trying to say before I got cut off was that they were also trying to empower the community at large with information, but their getting together didn't work out.
Right,
It
yeah,
was
the
too
personal
many geeks
relationship
in the
didn't work
kitchen.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
But they were trying to organize and let people, become more aware of how to deal with their publishing and claim what's theirs. And Abby wrote about that in a lot of her songs, claiming what's yours.
Mhm.
Throw it away, and if it belongs to you, it'll come back to you. But the first thing, you gotta claim it. So,
Right.
I would say that she taught me a lot about the etiquette of music, and just how to carry myself and how to and how to handle the truth, of the business, because it's not as great. The business is not as great as the music is. So
Yeah, absolutely. Without a
we
doubt.
trying to put something great into a box that ain't that great. You know what I
Right.
mean? Ain't made to keep all this greatness in it. So,
Right.
you're dealing with a lot of entities that just really, not necessarily interested in the development of the music,
Mhm.
more the sales of it. So then you got people kind of making choices about what they want to do.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
this is not an environment that encourages the musicians. And one thing I would say about Abby, to answer your question, to finish answering, is one of her dreams was Mosaica House.
Mm.
And Mosaica House is as much of a physical place as it is a spiritual place.
Yeah.
And for her, it was a place where musicians and artists could come for sanctuary,
Mhm.
because she felt the only way we could really develop this music as artists is to be cared for or have a place that people do care, and so a sanctuary of sorts. Just like Jesus had when he was hidden for that period of time, so he could develop.
Right.
And many other incredible people were given that chance in life, because I'm looking at my 5-year-old grandson, and unless you snatch him and take him off this earth, you ain't gonna have a chance to form an opinion not based on the trials and tribulations of those around them. So
Yeah.
she wanted a place like that, and as much as it's a physical place, it's a spiritual place, and a fantasy.
Mhm.
She couldn't fulfill it, but it's in me, to try to bring that, and yeah. So that's kind of what I got from her, a bit of her dream,
That's beautiful.
Oh, that
That's
is
beautiful.
as much as it helped me form my own.
Wow.
Love it.
That's very profound.
Yeah.
Mark, tell us about some of the artists that you're going to be performing with on the project. Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I'll let you.
Well, I look up to all of these people for, first of all, Terry Lynn Carrington on drums,
Absolutely. The
and
legendary
some
Terry Lynn
arranging.
Mhm.
I've been following her since I was young, and it's just kind of parallel career, not parallel in any way. I don't have the achievements that she has, but she's played with some of the most incredible musicians that I always adored. So
Yeah.
in that way, I mean, like I could never play with Harvey. You would see me on stage with Harvey necessarily, but she played with Harvey and a lot of incredible people. But Terry Lynn, I have Edmar Cologne, who's come up a bit under Terry Lynn's tutelage, but he's from Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Fine musician, tenor player, and soprano player, as well as an arranger. And so he's on deck, and he was helped. He was on the last tribute that I did with Terry Lynn, in coordination with the Kennedy Center and the Kimball Center in Philly and the Apollo.
Yeah.
So, and I have the incredible maestro and bassist and arranger and composer, Mr. Reggie Workman.
It's a bad boy.
Yeah, I mean that's my man. He's such a caring person outside of music, and just what you hear in his music is what he is in person. I mean, this cat's like he took me out to my daughter's house. First of all, he took me to his storage facility to get some stuff that he had in storage, and I was gonna climb up the thing, but he said, "No, I got it." This 80-year-old man's climbing up the bookshelf to get this one little thing he wanted my daughter to have. He's so caring, and took me all the way out to Brooklyn to give it to her, and you know,
wow.
I mean, like, and he's got that much care with the music, you know, to the point where he made the Village Vanguard after some 20 years of me playing. I haven't played there in 20 years, it seemed like. He was like, "You got to know who Mark Carey is. I want him on my gig." So he had me play with Trio 3, and which turned out great for me. You know, I think they had a good time too. But
yeah, absolutely.
He's Reggie Workman on bass. I have my good friend and collaborator, Mr. Samir Gupta, on tabla. And he'll be playing in the key of C, D, and E flat. For those who are into tabla, they're tuned percussion instruments. They have a lot of tones to them, so you know it's a bit of math. You know, finding how they fit in songs. You know, you don't just throw them in there. So yeah. And also I have Miss Jackie Gage on vocals, young vocalist who I've been working with for the last 3 years through the Harlem Sessions. And she's from California, and she's incredible. So when you hear her voice, you understand what I mean.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
And then I have two special guests, Marika Hughes on cello, and Trina Ramamurthy on violin.
Okay.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, the show is We Insist, Max Roach's Freedom Now Suite. It is part of the Mothers.
Of the movement.
Mothers of the Movement. Absolutely. It's going to be at Harlem Stage, the great Harlem Stage. So please go to harlemstage.org and get your tickets. You got to get the tickets. You got to see that. We'll be there, and we want to see you there as well. So we want to once again thank the great Mark Carey. Thank you again, Mark.
Oh, thank y'all.
Mark, we got
it on this one, huh? We did it.
I know.
Wait. No. We still got a long way to go. That was just on this. We still got a lot more to talk about here, but we'll do it next time. Thank you so much. C3 Arts Radio, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next Tuesday. We're out of here.
Bye.
Bye-bye.